I'm Justin Davis, and this is Drone Camps RC.
All right, my friends, welcome back to the channel. I'm Justin Davis, and we're gonna do a build today together. We're going to build up the Envision Gyarados frame. I showed it to you yesterday on the channel. We built it up from the bottom up. I showed you how to construct the bottom part and put the top plate on. So today we're going to use those same components that I recommended in yesterday's video for this build. It will be a 4S version of this quad. If you want to make it a 6S version, which these motors should be able to handle, you can get something that has a higher amp rate on it. This is only rated up to 20 amps, so this is good for a 4S build. Also, since these are low kV motors, we are swinging some 5-inch 5x2 HQ props on here, low pitch for long range. I'm hoping that we can run our 4SP3000 GAP RC battery on here, because these motors are not going to draw a lot of amps from this flight controller. So, you know, around 1700 kV, I believe they were, under 2000 kV. So they're capable of doing 6S or 4S. So I'm hoping that I can flight test this for you on the 4SP Li-ion battery and see if I can get like a tremendous flight time out of that battery. So it'd be pretty cool. It will be a very light build, and I'm going to be doing this analog today. So most of you guys have analog goggles, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to put an analog 5.8 VTX on here. We're going to use the GAP RC. This is the 20A F4 flight controller, and this one is used for smaller toothpicks. It is a 20x20 setup here, and the ESCs are built into the flight controller here. So we're just going to solder up the motor wires straight to the side of the board all the way around, motor 1, 2, 3, and 4, just like that in Betaflight. We're going to have a right turn rear configuration here, so right turn prop here, left turn, right turn, left turn there. And once we're done with our stack, we're going to put the top on. We're going to mount our camera up here. This is a 20mm camera hole post in the front here, so you'll need two M2 bolts on the side of your camera there, but M3 hardware around the base here, and we're going to run our antennas out these poles right here, and hopefully put our FPV antenna out the back right here, depending on what I can find in my shop. So we'll try to make that work, hopefully, but we're not going to have any GPS on or anything right now. I will also suggest, if you're going to add GPS to this quad, that would be cool for long range. I'll try to put a GPS link down below and a flight controller that can handle 6S and GPS option. They are available at the 20x20 level. So I will definitely put those links down below. But to get started today, you guys are going to need, first and foremost, soldering iron, which I'll put a link to as well. As always, we're going to use a XT30 today, and that'll come right off the back right here like this. We're going to solder that up. You'll also need an M2 and an M3 driver set. We're going to need a Phillips head screwdriver, and those are for these posts right here. These are the metal posts that came along with the kit, and if they're too tall, I'm just going to snip them off with a pair of snips. You will need a pair of wire strips, wire strips and wire snips for this job. And these are the plastic posts that came along with the GAP RC stack right here, and I might run the plastic one out the back right here just to give it a little more stability. You also get in the kit box some extra pieces of dampener, so maybe I'll put one under the rear back there, and just to give that something to stand on in the very back, because right now she's kind of floating on 3 right there. But when you're going to put these GAP RC spacers on here, I want to give you guys some quick information. When you're doing that, these are kind of hard to put in sometimes, and what you have to do is you have to pinch these through these holes right here. And that's one of the first things you're going to do in this build. Is I take my M3 driver and I go from the bottom. You can see that this is shorter on the very top and taller on the bottom, so make sure you don't flip these around the wrong way. That's the first thing you're going to do, is you're going to come up from the bottom and you're going to push these gently through, and then just kind of pull them through with your fingernail. I don't have any fingernails, so it's kind of hard to do, but once it's all done and you have all your grommets on, next step is to run your post through this protector plate right here that's going to protect your board from touching those bottom screws right there. And this is the way this board goes on. It's going to go on at a 45-degree angle, just like this, and you want GAP RC to be readable from where you're putting it on from. So you can see the logos here, and we're just going to put it on just like that. And when you check it in Betaflight, this will actually come already ready to go on a 45, because that's the way this board is built out. So cool. So we have motor 1 here, 2, 3, and 4 there, just like inside Betaflight. So super cool. Let's go ahead now. I'm going to turn on the fan, you guys, and first thing we're going to do is solder up all of our motor wires all the way around. So I will see you in a second. So step 1 is to tin up each motor tab and each terminal for the battery leads. Now go around the board all the way around 1, 2, 3, and 4, and it doesn't matter which wire goes on first. So we're going to tin up each wire on each motor, and no particular order. We're going to solder these up. Just make sure that you don't bridge the tabs, meaning touch solder from one tab wire to the next. That will short out your motor and cause a smoke to come out of your flight controller and burn up your ESCs. Very important. Now tin up each wire here first, and then we're ready to solder them down to the respective tab. Red is going to go to positive terminal here and heat up the wire first, then set on the tab, so we don't have tab separation from the flight controller. That's very important. Pull the soldering iron away from the flight controller and you should get a nice blob. Again, I'm heating up the wire first and then the terminal. You want both to be hot and pull away and release, and it should look like that. Give it a tug to make sure. And now we're going to add a zip tie on this to secure this terminal. We don't want it being pulled away from the quad if the battery flies off the quad. Now we're going to trim this a little shorter. It's a little bit long here, so I like to trim them about the same length. Tin those up with a little bit of solder before we start. You can just bend it up slightly and add a little bit of solder, and you want to do this kind of quick. Don't do it long enough that it's going to separate the wire from the terminal. Just a little bit on top, and it should look like this. And you can kind of bend that out of the way. And now we're all done with our motor wires and the capacitor. Looking pretty good here. So step number 4 is we're going to solder on the wires to the receiver, and that goes to signal, 5 volt, and ground, just like that. And S-bus is the white wire to the NR2 tab. I-bus RX goes to the R2 tab at the very top. Now we're going to tin up each wire here. So this is our flight schematic that comes in the GAP RC 20A F4 kit, and you can see here R2 is up here and we have NR2 down there, so we can choose NR2 next, and that should get us going. Alright guys, so at this point you're pretty much ready to bind up your XM Plus to your radio, and a lot of you guys are using the Radio Master. It is running OpenTX right now, so what you're going to do in this process is hold down this gold bind button with your fingernail the best you can, and you're going to plug in your battery while you're in bind mode in your radio. So we're going to go into the radio, click on model, and that's going to take you into the current model. Mine just says Ishin. I'm going to leave that the same for now, and go to the very bottom. First thing you're going to do is make sure you set failsafe mode to no pulses. It will not be set. That means that when you lose signal from your quad, it's going to drop to the ground immediately, so that's what we always do. Otherwise it might keep flying. So we're going to set this to FrSky D16 for that, AETR. This is the way we set up always on the channel, and we're going to hit the bind button right here. It's going to ask us if we want telemetry. After you click again, it's going to start beeping, and mine only does about 3 or 4 beeps, so I have to do this kind of quick. So I'm just going to go ahead and start this process, and I'm going to hold down this gold button with my fingernail, and I'm going to have my battery ready in my hand, and I'm going to click the wheel there. It's going to start beeping, and you should see that you get a green light on your receiver. Now I have a green light on my receiver. I know it's bound, so I can unplug. Now I can go back and exit that menu all the way out, and I can plug in a battery again, and I can double check to make sure that I have a green light. And you have to hold your quad about 3 feet away from your radio for it to go green. So now you see it's green and we're bound. Okay, so now go ahead and plug in your quad again, and let's go back inside Betaflight real quick. Good to go to the ports, and I want to show you how the ports are set up for the NR2 tab. So once you have your signal wire soldered down to that tab, you can go to the ports and enable UART1 here and serial RX on UART2. And then you're going to save and reboot down at the bottom right hand corner. Once you do that, you'll come back into Betaflight and just double check your configuration page. That's the next tab down. You want to see S-bus here for serial receiver provider, and receiver mode should be SpecSat S-bus, And when you click on receiver now, you should see that your sticks are moving. You all should go to the left and right like this, and I'll hold my transmitter up here so you can see it. This is how it works. So your channel maps are all of these. So left, right on the yaw axis, that looks good. Now the throttle should go up and down like this. And aileron, which is your roll axis, should go left and right just like that. And your pitch, which would be your elevator on an airplane, forward and backwards just like that. And usually I have my arm switch as this one here, so that'll be aux 1. This is aux 2 for the flight modes, and over here can be the beeper. Well, the beeper is usually up here on SG for me, and I'll have to activate that. Maybe it's on SC. So we'll have 4 switches active total. So if you want to do flip over or you want to add anything else on there, you can do that. So aux 4 would be my beeper for temporarily, and everything looks good on here. Okay, my friends, now we're going to do step 7, which is wiring up your camera and your VTX. Now we're going to power the camera from the power out option, the 5-volt power out on the VTX. This is the rail we're going to solder everything to, and it only has one power option here, guys. So we're going to power the VTX, and then we're going to use the power out, the 5-volt out, to power the camera, okay? So we're going to bridge over from the VTX to the camera. Make sure there's no frayed wires here. We don't want anything slipping up and contacting the tab next to it. Go ahead and grab your 5-volt in, which is this red wire right here coming from your VTX. You want to refer to the schematic on your VTX. That's going to power the VTX from the board. Now grab the ground wire there. That's looking good. Just tug on those to make sure everything is nice and tight. And now we're going to grab the camera yellow wire to the video in tab. And take your time, guys. If you mess up and you bridge solder over to the next tab, just redo the whole thing, pull it off and redo the whole thing. It can get quite messy, so just be careful. At this point, you're going to solder up the VTX video wire to the video out tab and refer back to your schematic to make sure you have that right. The video ground 5-volt out right there should look like the way we did it here, and refer back to the flight controller schematic as well to just make sure you have things right. Now, step 8 is going to be powering the camera with the VTX 5-volt out, and make sure again you have those correct by looking at your schematic. You want to use your helping hands. That will help you solder and connect each wire. And I don't have heat shrink right now, so I'm going to make sure that I put liquid tape on them, but put the heat shrink on before you make these connections. Again, put your heat shrink on the wire and then slide it over, and go ahead and heat up your heat shrink and you should be good. Alright guys, so you pretty much should be all wired up at this point. We bound the receiver, we got it working in Betaflight. We now have the camera wired up and powered from the Eachine Nano V2 VTX, which is cool. These are the 2 wires that come out for external power off of this receiver or this transmitter. So the other 3 wires go down to the flight board, and I showed you where those go. These 2 wires are the power wires, the ground and the power. Those go to the 5-volt and ground here. And we have the video wire, which goes to your video out. That is the green one right there. And then the one below that is video in. So always on these boards, the video in is going to be from the source from your camera, and that's this wire right here. So get those 2 out of the way. Now it's that wire right there. So at this point, I didn't have any heat shrink, so I'm going to have to just take a little bit of liquid tape and cover these up. And if you use liquid tape, don't plug in your battery until after it's well dried. You can also use like a heat gun or something like that. If you want to double check everything before you plug something in live with a live battery straight to a battery, you can always get one of these smoke stoppers. These things are super cool. They do make versions of them, I believe, with some XT30s on them. You can probably convert these XT60s over, but at this point, once I get my liquid tape on here, we should be good to go as far as tidying up these wires and just getting them ready for mounting the camera. The next thing we'll do is mount this camera right up front here, and inside the run cam box you also got some screws. So we're going to go ahead and tidy up all these wires. We'll use some zip ties, maybe some tiny ones in here to keep things tidy, and then we'll put the top on, and I will route my dipole out the back for now. I can upgrade this later if I want to a different VTX if I'm going to do long range, but for some freestyle stuff like I'm going to do with this quad, this should be fine. And I'll also do some testing for you guys with that Lion pack just to see how long of a flight time I can get with this quad, but it's looking pretty cool for now. So we're done with all the soldering. Now we can go ahead and take our camera and install our camera up inside the canopy. So just slide your camera up in there. Make sure that your wiring is at the top of the camera so it's not upside down when you turn on your goggles. And we're going to go ahead and take the M2 driver and just run the shortest screw in the camera box through the canopy. That's the one I think that fits the best because there doesn't seem to be a very thick sidewall on this canopy, so I don't want to use a very long screw because I don't really want to damage the inside of the camera. And here I'm just going to take my time and get it lined up correctly, and we're going to go ahead and drive that screw in. And we don't have to over tighten at this point because you might adjust the camera angle later. I usually like to fly around 25 to 30% tilt on my camera. Sometimes a little higher if I'm going to do some super fast flying. If you want to go slower, bring your camera angle down. Now at this point, it's pretty much up to you to do whatever type of wire organization you want to do. A lot of times I just start to twist things up, and that helps tidy everything up nicely. Once I get everything twisted up kind of tight, make sure you don't over pull things, of course, and then we can add a zip tie on to secure things even more. Now after that, what I do is I take some 3M VHB and I put on the bottom of the VTX and just take off a strip of VHB with your snips and trim it to fit to the bottom. I try to be a little bit neat about that process because I don't like a lot of it hanging out. It just kind of collects dirt if you have any kind of extra 3M VHB hanging out off the edge of the VTX. So once I have it trimmed to fit and I put the VTX down, I can run the dipole antenna up through the back, and then I can put some 3M VHB on the back of the receiver as well and stick that down to the top of the flight controller. And I'm just going to be super neat with this, as neat as I can. And we're going to pull that tab back off the 3M VHB with the pair of snips. And that's the way it works the best, or you can use a razor blade. And we're going to go ahead and stick that down. And I'm going to run a zip tie around this whole stack, the receiver and the VTX, when I stick this receiver down. And we're going to put the top plate on. And then we're ready to do some Betaflight and propellers after Betaflight. All right, guys. So at this point, you should have put everything down with a little bit of VHB. This is 3M VHB that I use to put down the VTX and the receiver here. I tidied up the wires behind the camera with some zip tie, and I just went right underneath the frame here with a zip tie and just kind of jellied everything down right there. So everything looks secure and in place, and at this point we're pretty much ready to go over to Betaflight. The last thing you'll need to do is just put on your top plate and put on these 4 bolts on the very bottom here. 1, 2, 3, 4 after that, and we'll put our strap through on the bottom. That's always a fun final thing to do there. Just run that right through that bottom plate. If you're going to run your battery from front to back just like that, that looks pretty good. I'll just pull that through. Nice thick strap there, should hold that 6S battery. And if it's not long enough, you can always get a longer one, but that looks pretty good. So at this point, you're ready to put on your props, and we won't do any motor testing or anything like that with the props on, with the bolts on. If I do motor testing, a lot of times what I do is I just kind of do like props off, and I just momentarily flick the switch on the transmitter to see which way the motor's going. If it's going the wrong direction in BL Heli, you're going to change that, you're going to reverse it. And I'll open up BL Heli and we'll check all these motors together, and we'll make sure all of them are going the right direction. But we're going to set this up right turn rear. So RTR, remember that. Right turn motor is motor number 1. That's going to be a right turn motor. Grab the left hand turning prop, put that one on motor number 2, which is this motor. The next motor was number 3, and we're going to go left turn on that one as well. And then Motor number 4 is going to be a right turn motor. So right turn rear configuration is ready to go, for the exception of the bolts on the props. So go ahead and grab your bolts and put the bolts, 2 bolts on each prop, and you're just about ready to fly. But like I said before, don't put your bolts on until you've tested motor direction 1 prop at a time. So take all the props off the quad. Be very careful when you're doing motor testing that you don't have it fly up on the bench. And one of the reasons that I only do 1 prop at a time is exactly because I don't want it to fly up in my face or hit the ceiling. So kind of put one hand down on the quad like this and test to see which way that motor's going. These props are not likely to fly off, so don't go full throttle with the transmitter when you're trying to test each motor. Just be super careful there that you just kind of what you can do is just momentarily flip the arm switch instead of using the throttle, because if you have air mode active, it's just going to spin the motor up momentarily, and then you're disarmed again. So you can do that 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we'll go ahead into Betaflight now. I'll show you how I set mine up, and you can do the same for yours, and I'll give you the CLI dump as well. Here we go. Betaflight, I'm just going to go ahead and unplug it real quick and plug it back in for you. And the first thing we're going to do, guys, is we're going to check orientation. We already did it, but we're going to go ahead and turn around the quad facing you and hit reset Z-axis right there. Click on that, and now back is back, right, left, forward, and back. Everything looks good there. The next thing we need to do is go down to ports, but we already been here and we already set that up. So we have UR1 active in the configuration MSP on that line, and then we have 0RX active there for our RX tab, and we have right turn rear motor configuration in the configuration page. D-shot 600 is good, motor stop is off, motor idle. We're going to turn that up to about 4. So go ahead and type in 4.0 right there on the motor idle throttle value. That looks good. And down to the arming, we want to make that 180. And the gyro update frequency, PID loop frequency, 8 kilohertz. That's set to the way that GEP-RC has it. Accelerometer you want on, of course. Receiver, S-Bus, SpecSat, S-Bus, good. S-Bus serial receiver provider, that's good as well. And down here in the other features, we're going to leave soft serial on. Telemetry, LED strip, we don't really need that on. OSD, air mode, we could turn on. Dynamic filter, yes. We'll turn on RX lost and RX set as well. And the rest of that down there, we're just going to leave that on. So we're going to go ahead and save and reboot at this point, down at the bottom right. And you're going to come back inside Betaflight. So at this point, we're going to go up to power and battery, and we already set this up 3.2 and 3.24 there. Failsafe we want to set to drop. Okay, now PID tuning, we're going to leave this stock PIDs and see what happens. If it needs a tune, I'll try to tune it later for you. And receiver, at this point you don't see any receiver working. I'm just going to turn on my radio and see if the radio and the receiver talk to each other without the battery being plugged in. If you don't see anything at this point, and we already went through the other part of binding up the quad and your radio and Betaflight, you might have an issue. You might have to go back and try another tab. So right now, without the battery plugged in, mine is showing me that the channel maps are working. So roll, left and right, pitch, forward and back, yaw, left and right, and throttle up and down. So we have aux1, aux3, and aux4 active as well. And that's the way we have that set up. We're going to click save there, and the channel map we want AETR. That's the way it's going to be set up in our radio. And the modes, we're going to do an ARM mode here, and if you have this blank, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that. So you add range, and then this tab right here, select aux1, and then these sliders right here can be dragged over, and these little tabs on the end can be dragged over as well. And I like to make them kind of tidy like that, and go down here and save. You won't see a stick moving until you click save. So now you click save and you can see that highlights red, and now that's an arm state and this is disarm state. Okay, now we're going to add angle mode just for fun. We'll put that on aux2 because that is going to be my modes switch, which is my SE switch on the transmitter. Now I'm going to click save there. So right there I'm in angle mode, which is stability mode. If I click one more click over to position 2 on that switch, I go to acro mode. And you can also add horizon in here as well if you want to play around with that. And then if you're looking for acro mode, it's not actually an option in Betaflight, so kind of confusing. But when you're free floating over here, or here, if there wasn't horizon here, if you're free floating over here, this is acro mode. Kind of strange, but that's the way it works. So in the middle, and then back to stability mode there, which is also called angle mode. Now fail-safe, we're going to leave that. Beeper, we're going to add that on channel 3, aux 3. Excuse me, I'm going to slide that all the way out to the end there. And just going to check that. That's my SC switch, SC. And flip over after crash. We're not going to do that on this particular quad because it's not really a whoop or anything. And I have props exposed to the ground. So that's looking good for the modes. Now we're going to go down to motors. And here's where you can sort of test out your motors to begin with. One prop on each motor. And at this point, your layout and the way your motors are spinning might be different than mine because there are 3 wires on each motor. Doesn't matter how you solder them on. You can switch it inside BO Heli. So I'm going to run through my motors real quick and see if mine are working properly. And I'm going to plug in a battery to do that. So I'm going to grab a battery real quick. I have a 3S battery here, so I'm just using one prop with no screws on top of the prop. And I'm going to hold down the quad. And what I might have to do is unplug from Betaflight, plug the battery back in, and let everything load up properly, move the battery out of the way of the motor. Now I'm going to go back inside Betaflight, make sure all the things on my desk are totally clear. I'm holding down the quad, and I'm going to go back to the motors tab, and I'm going to say yes, I understand here, and I'm just going to use the master and just flick it up one time. So that is backwards. My motor number 1 is backwards, so I can remember this or I can write it down. Motor number 1 needs to be reversed because right now it's going the wrong direction. So I'm going to take that same prop and I'm going to move it up to motor number 2. And now motor number 2, let's see where that one's at. That one should go left. If that one doesn't go left, if it goes right, then it means I need to reverse that one as well. And that one's going left. So that one's good. Okay, that one's good. Now we're going to go with motor number 3. And you can do these individually too. You can only spin one motor if you want. So you can go over here to this tab. So motor number 3 should be going to the left. And that one's going right. So far, I need motor number 1 and motor number 3 reversed. Okay. Now I'm going to move this. You guys remember that for me, okay? Number 1, motor 3. Now we're on motor number 4, and that one should turn right. And that one is turning left, I believe. Yeah. Yep. Turning to the left. So now I need 1, 3, and 4 reversed. Okay, 1, 3, and 4. So at this point, what I can do is I can close out Betaflight and never have Betaflight open the same time as BO Heli when you're trying to do this. Okay, so go ahead and close out Betaflight. We're going to open up BO Heli here, and I'm going to scooch this in so you can see it. I'm going to unplug the USB cable, and I'm going to unplug the battery. I'm going to go ahead and plug in the battery again. I'm going to wait for everything to load up, all the chimes to work, and I'm going to take the prop off, that last prop I was playing around with, and I'm going to plug in the USB port to the cable. Now you'll see USB modem there. Go ahead and click connect, and now click read setup, and we're just going to go down to motor number 1. We're going to reverse that. 1, 3, and 4 we need to reverse, so we'll go reverse all those and leave number 2 normal. And what you do at this point is you just write setup. And it's going to go through up here at the top, and it's going to read and write all the different changes that you did. And so at this point you should be good with your motor directions. And before you try to do your first hover, you're going to go back into Betaflight and test this all over again. So we're going to disconnect at this point. I believe everything is good on here. And you'll hear the quad restart. And then after the quad restarts again, at this point, you can unplug the battery and the USB cable. So I'm going to do that. Now we're going to go back inside Betaflight. We're going to close out BL Heli. So I'm going to open Betaflight, close BL Heli configurator, and let's go ahead and connect. And at this point, all we have to really do is, you can do one more motor test, make sure everything is perfect, and then you can set up your OSD. So I'm going to go down to OSD for you guys. I'm going to show you guys what I put on my OSD. So I'm going to turn off some of the warnings. I'm going to use timer number 2. I'm going to put that down at the bottom left, and you're going to have to plug in your goggles at this point and test things inside your goggles to make sure that things aren't like kind of scooched off the screen or being cut off or below the screen. Sometimes things can be. If they don't show up, move them up a few points here, and you can drag and drop things just like that. Okay, so battery usage, battery voltage, that looks good, and we're going to do fly mode. Sometimes I'd like to see what fly mode I'm in. I'll put that right above timer number 2. And also I want VTX on there. I want VTX channel and power. That will show me channel and power. I usually put that at the top left. And if you want to, you can put the craft name on there or your pilot name. And I usually put that right in the middle, down at the bottom, in the middle of all that. It looks like a pretty good layout. I might scooch that over a little bit. Maybe one more there. And that will change when we go from angle, horizon to acro. So I'm not going to do craft name there. Actually, I should, so I know what this is later for you guys. I'm going to go ahead and put that on there. And where you change that is on the main page. So now at the bottom, click Save. And we're going to go back to Configuration, our main page, and go to Craft Name. And we're going to type in Gyara. How did you spell that? Gyarados. Gyarados. Okay, Gyarados. I might have that right. Gyarados. Okay, now we're going to save and reboot again. And when we go back to the OSD this time, it will show us our craft name or your pilot name. And you can scooch it to center as best you can get it and click Save. So at this point, we're pretty good. We don't have to do anything on the video transmitter. It's not configured for that. So it's just an old school setup here. And we're going to type in version. And it shows me a quite old version. But I'm not going to update the firmware and go through all this all over again. I'm just going to leave it just how it came from the factory, and it should fly just fine. So at this point, I'm going to do a dump for you. And we're going to save this to file. So we're going to save this to file, and I'll include this down below in the video link so you can download this and have a backup of what I just did, or load it onto your quad if you want to. So I'm going to go ahead and save to file, and we'll call that Gyarados. Okay, it's already set to Gyarados. And desktop. Oops. Do that one more time. Save to file. I already named it for me. Save. And now I'll upload that to a Google document for you guys, and you guys can use it at your discretion. So we're all good in Betaflight now at this point, guys. And final steps are, I'm going to just go back through the radio real quick for you, live on the camera, and show you guys how to add a switch on there and get it working in Betaflight. And then at that point, you should be pretty proficient at being able to build and set up your first quad. All right, guys, let's go ahead and set the total build with the props on the scale, everything all together here, and see what we get. 197 grams on the dot. So to get this one under 250 grams with a battery, you'd have to use an awfully small battery. But the good thing is that it is possible. It's just you're going to have such a short flight time. However, you can enjoy the fact that we built a super fast quad that is, this one is 4S capable. You can make it 6S capable, and it will be somewhere around the 250 gram neighborhood, which is pretty awesome. If you're flying like a 450 on this, these are ultra low kV motors, so you should still get a decent flight time. And also, again, I'll try to test out those Lions for you guys with this particular quad and see how it works out. But the batteries I'm going to suggest are going to be the 4S 850, the 650, and the 4SP 3000 milliamp from Gep RC. But wow, isn't that awesome? This quad is under 250 G. Look at that for a 5-inch quad, not bad. All right, guys, at this point, say you don't have any switches active in your radio at all. None of these switches are active. So the first thing you want to add is your arm switch, and this is going to be SF switch, and we're just going to go into the radio, into the model menu first, and we're going to click and hold on that, and then we're going to press page all the way over to inputs here. We're going to go back to inputs. Okay, and then we're going to scroll down, and after channel 4, so these channels go like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if you're looking at the receiver tab inside Betaflight, you will see that these turn into aux. So these are aux 1, 2, 3, and 4 right here. The next one's down. So I can go and delete one of these, for example, and just re-add it for you. So I'm just going to delete that one, and that was the SD switch over here, which is usually going to be my turtle mode switch, but I'm not actually using that on this quad. So you see that when I moved it, and that was SC actually, so I want to add SD there, so it's actually this switch. So I'm going to click and hold and edit, and I'll go down to SC there, and it's flashing. So now when I move this, you'll see that automatically switches into SD. So then you hit return and go back, and now that switch is set. So when we look up at Betaflight, for example, I'll just move the camera up here manually for you. When I switch the SD switch, that is aux 4. So SA, or let's see, the arm switch, for example, is SF. This long momentary switch right here, 2-position switch, I mean, and then SE. So that's going to be our mode switch. SE is a 3-position switch. So arm switch is SF. SE is going to be your modes. SA is not working for anything. SB not working. SC not working. SD should be working. So if you get the controller too close to the quad, it won't work sometimes. So aux 4 can be your beeper if you like, or you can do the larger stick right here. So that is SC, and SC is active. So SC is usually a good switch for a beeper. And the way you do that is you just go back to your modes, and beeper's on aux 3. So let's just check that SC is there. Yep, it is moving down to that right there. So I'll just zoom out for you and do it live. So SC right there, you can see it move. That little gold bar ends up right in the end right here and active. Let's scooch it in a little more and save. Now arm switch working, and this is SE, which is our mode switch. You can see it move from here out to here. Pretty cool. So you should be all set up now, guys, for all your switches and everything. It's super easy to add a switch, and hopefully that wasn't too hard for you guys to do, and you're off and running with your quad. So now I'm ready to put my props on and go outside and give it a hover test. Guys, take care. I'm Justin Davis. If you'd like to check out my Patreon, please do, because always trying to help you guys out on the Camps channel and bring you more information all the time right here on the Drone Camps channel. Guys, take care. Be safe, and I'll see you on the next one.